The small white casket looked impossibly tiny in the sea of black suits and dark dresses. I stood there, my hand gripping my husband Marcus's arm so tightly my knuckles had gone white, watching as they lowered my 6-year-old son Tyler into the ground. The pastor's words blurred together into meaningless sounds. All I could think about was how Tyler had asked me to read him one more story the night before he died, and how I'd been too exhausted from the hospital visits to do it. Tyler had been born with a rare genetic condition called spinal muscular atrophy. The doctors told us he might not live past his 2nd birthday, but Tyler was a fighter. He proved them wrong year after year, his bright smile lighting up every room despite the wheelchair, despite the breathing treatments, despite everything his little body had to endure. My name is Alina, and Tyler was my miracle child. After 3 miscarriages, the doctors said I might never carry a baby to term. When Tyler arrived, even with his condition, he was perfect to me. Every labored breath, every moment of joy when he'd laugh at cartoons, every small victory when he managed to feed himself, it was all precious. But not everyone saw it that way. My mother-in-law, Patricia Whitmore, had made her feelings about Tyler clear from the moment he was born. She was a woman who believed in appearances, in perfection, in maintaining the family image. Tyler, with his medical equipment and special needs, didn't fit into her vision of what a Whitmore grandchild should be. "It's such a shame," she'd whisper to relatives at family gatherings, loud enough for me to hear. "Such a burden on Marcus and Elena. They could have had normal children instead." When Tyler would have seizures or breathing difficulties at family events, Patricia would suggest we take him home. "This isn't the place for him," she'd say with that practiced smile that never reached her eyes. "Maybe next time you can get a babysitter." Marcus tried to defend Tyler, but Patricia had a way of making her cruelty sound like concern. "I'm just thinking of what's best for everyone," she'd say. "The other children get so frightened when Tyler has his episodes." But Tyler was loved. My parents adored him, calling him their little warrior. My sister would drive 3 hours just to read him stories. Marcus's father, before he passed away 2 years ago, used to spend entire afternoons teaching Tyler card tricks that he could do with his limited hand mobility. The only person who seemed to see Tyler as a mistake was Patricia. 2 weeks before Tyler died, his condition worsened rapidly. We spent those final days in the pediatric ICU, taking turns sleeping in the uncomfortable chair beside his bed. Patricia visited exactly once. She stayed for 10 minutes, complained about the smell of the hospital, and left without saying goodbye to Tyler. Marcus was devastated by her coldness, but I'd stopped expecting anything from her years ago. The funeral was small but meaningful. Tyler's teacher from his special needs school spoke about his infectious laughter. Our neighbor talked about how Tyler would wave from his window every morning when she walked her dog. Marcus gave a beautiful eulogy about how Tyler taught him the true meaning of unconditional love. After the service, people gathered at our house for the traditional post-funeral meal. I moved through the rooms like a ghost, accepting condolences, trying to smile when people shared their favorite Tyler memories. My sister stayed close, making sure I ate something, making sure I wasn't alone with my grief. That's when Patricia cornered me in the kitchen. I was standing by the sink, washing dishes because I needed something to do with my hands, something to focus on besides the gaping hole in my chest where my heart used to be. Patricia approached me with that same practiced smile, the one that had fooled people for years into thinking she was a caring grandmother. "Elena, dear," she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "I know this has been difficult for you." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. I just wanted to get through this day. She moved closer, glancing around to make sure no one else was within earshot. Then she leaned in, her voice dropping to what she probably thought was a comforting whisper. "But honestly, this might be a blessing in disguise," she said. "Now you and Marcus can focus on giving me real grandchildren. Healthy ones. You're still young enough to try again. And this time you won't have to worry about defects." The dish I was holding slipped from my numb fingers and shattered in the sink. I stared at her, certain I had misheard. "What did you say?" I whispered. Patricia's smile widened, mistaking my shock for agreement. "I'm just saying, Tyler was never going to have a real life anyway. At least now he can start fresh, give Marcus the son he deserves, a proper Whitmore here." Something inside me shattered along with that dish, but instead of falling apart, something else took its place. Something cold and calculating. You see, I have learned something important during Tyler's 6 years of life. When people show you who they really are, you should believe them. And when they cross certain lines, you should be ready. I had started recording Patricia's comments about Tyler years ago. At first, it was just for my own protection, evidence of her cruelty in case Marcus ever doubted what she was really like. But as Tyler's condition worsened, I realized I might need this evidence for something more important. My phone was already in my hand, a habit I developed whenever Patricia was around. The recording app was always ready, just in case. This time, I had captured every poisonous word. "You're absolutely right, Patricia," I said, my voice eerily calm. "This changes everything." She beamed, thinking she had finally found common ground with me. "I'm so glad you understand, dear. We can put all this unpleasantness behind us now." "Oh, we definitely can," I agreed. "Excuse me for just a moment." I walked calmly out of the kitchen and into the living room, where about 30 family members and friends were gathered, sharing quiet conversations and comfort food. Marcus was sitting with his uncle, both of them looking exhausted. My sister was helping serve coffee. Tyler's teacher was talking with my parents near the fireplace. I cleared my throat. "Excuse me, everyone. I'd like to say something." The room gradually fell silent. People turned to face me, expecting perhaps a "thank you for coming" or a touching memory about Tyler. "I want to share something with you all," I said, pulling out my phone. "Something that was just said to me in the kitchen about my son. About Tyler." Patricia appeared in the doorway, her face suddenly pale as she realized what was happening. "Elena, what are you?" she started to say. I pressed play. Patricia's voice filled the room crystal clear. "But honestly, this might be a blessing in disguise. Now you and Marcus can focus on giving me real grandchildren. Healthy ones. You're still young enough to try again. And this time you won't have to worry about defects." The silence that followed was deafening. You could have heard a pin drop in that room. Then came her voice again. "I'm just saying, Tyler was never going to have a real life anyway. At least now you can start fresh. Give Marcus the son he deserves. A proper Whitmore here." Marcus shot to his feet, his face a mask of horror and rage. "Mother, what the hell is wrong with you?" But I wasn't done. I had years of recordings. "That was from 5 minutes ago," I said calmly. "But there's more. So much more." I played another clip, this one from Tyler's 4th birthday party. "I don't know why they insist on celebrating. What's the point of a birthday party for a child like that? It's just prolonging everyone's misery." Then another from last Christmas. "Elena's obsession with that boy is unhealthy. She needs to face reality and stop wasting time on something that's never going to improve." And another from when Tyler had his last major seizure 6 months ago. "Maybe it would be kinder to everyone if they just stopped all these medical interventions. Some things aren't meant to survive." With each recording, the room grew more horrified. Tyler's teacher stood up and walked out, unable to listen anymore. My mother-in-law's sister stared at Patricia like she was looking at a stranger. Marcus's uncle shook his head in disgust. Patricia tried to defend herself. "Those recordings are taken out of context," she stammered. "I never meet." "Which part was out of context, Patricia?" I asked. "The part where you called my son defective, or the part where you said his death was a blessing?" Marcus was staring at his mother like he'd never seen her before. "How could you say these things? About Tyler? About my son?" "Your son was suffering," Patricia said, her mask finally slipping completely. "I was the only one honest enough to say what everyone was thinking. That boy was never going to be normal. Never going to be the grandson I could be proud of." The room erupted then. Marcus's cousin called her disgusting. My sister told her to get out. Tyler's teacher, who had returned to the doorway, said she'd never heard anything so vile in 30 years of working with special needs children. But I wasn't finished. "There's one more thing," I said, my voice cutting through the chaos. "Patricia, you mentioned starting fresh. Giving Marcus a proper son. But here's what you don't know." I looked directly at her, seeing the fear in her eyes for the first time. "Tyler wasn't my first child with spinal muscular atrophy. I had a daughter before him, Sophia. She died when she was 3 months old. The condition came from Marcus's side of the family, from the Whitmore genes." The color drained completely from Patricia's face. "So if Marcus and I were to have another child, there would be a 25% chance that baby would have the same condition." The same defects you're so disgusted by. And if that happened, would you tell me that child's death was also a blessing? Patricia opened and closed her mouth like a fish, unable to form words. Get out, Marcus said quietly. Get out of my house. Get out of our lives. Marcus, I'm your mother. No, he said, his voice stronger now. A mother doesn't say those things about her grandchild. A mother doesn't celebrate the death of a 6-year-old boy. You're not welcome here anymore. Patricia looked around the room desperately, seeking an ally, someone who might defend her. She found nothing but faces full of disgust and horror. You'll regret this, she said finally, her true nature emerging completely. When you realize I was right, when you see that I was only trying to help. The only thing I regret, I said, is that Tyler lived his entire short life knowing his grandmother saw him as a burden. But he's at peace now, and I'll make sure his memory is protected from people like you. Patricia grabbed her purse and stormed toward the door. Before leaving, she turned back one more time. You've turned my own son against me, she spat. No, I replied. I just played back your own words. You did this to yourself. After she left, the room remained quiet for a long time. People didn't know what to say. How do you process that level of cruelty, especially on the day of a child's funeral? Marcus came to me, tears streaming down his face. Elena, I'm so sorry. I knew she was difficult, but I never imagined. It's not your fault, I said, holding him as he broke down. You couldn't have known how deep her cruelty went. Tyler's teacher approached us. I want you to know, she said, that Tyler was one of the most joyful children I've ever worked with. He brought light into every room he entered. Anyone who couldn't see that was blind. In the days that followed, the story spread through the family network. Patricia's siblings stopped speaking to her. Her church friends, when they heard the recordings, quietly distanced themselves. The country club where she'd spent decades building her social standing suddenly found reasons not to include her in events. Marcus's uncle called to apologize on behalf of the family and to tell us that Patricia had been removed from the family trust fund that Tyler was supposed to inherit. That money will go to the Spinal Muscular Atrophy Research Foundation, he said, in Tyler's name. 2 weeks later, I received a letter from Patricia. It wasn't an apology. Instead, she doubled down, claiming I had manipulated the recordings and turned the family against her. She threatened to sue me for defamation. I forwarded the letter to my attorney along with all the recordings I had collected over the years. The lawyer assured me that truth is an absolute defense against defamation, and that Patricia's threats were empty. A month later, Patricia tried to show up at Marcus's workplace, demanding to see him. Security escorted her out. She tried calling from different numbers, but we had blocked them all. She even attempted to contact me through social media, but I had documented everything and reported her for harassment. The final straw came when she tried to visit Tyler's grave. I had installed a small memorial bench there, where I would sit and read to him sometimes, the stories I wish I had read that last night. Patricia showed up with flowers and a note claiming she had always loved Tyler despite his challenges. I was there that day, placing fresh flowers on his headstone. When I saw her approaching, I started recording again. What are you doing here, Patricia? I have a right to visit my grandson's grave, she said defensively. Do you? The same grandson you called defective. The one whose death you called a blessing. She placed her flowers anyway, ignoring my questions. But as she turned to leave, she couldn't resist one final cruelty. You know, Elena, I hope someday you understand that I was only trying to help. When you have a normal child, you'll see what real happiness feels like. I smiled sadly. Patricia, I did have a normal child. Tyler was perfect exactly as he was. The only abnormal thing in his life was having a grandmother who couldn't love him. 6 months later, Marcus and I decided to move across the country. We needed a fresh start, somewhere without memories of Patricia's poison. We found a beautiful house with a garden where I could plant flowers in Tyler's memory. We also decided to volunteer with families of special needs children, sharing our story and offering support. Tyler's legacy wouldn't be defined by his grandmother's cruelty, but by the love he brought into the world and the love we could share with others in his honor. On the first anniversary of Tyler's death, we received a package. Inside was a letter from Patricia claiming she had forgiven us for turning the family against her, along with a cheap sympathy card. I didn't read the letter. Instead, I added it to the file I kept of all her correspondence, The same file that contained years of recordings documenting her treatment of Tyler. Because I learned something important from dealing with Patricia. Some people will never change, never admit they're wrong, and never stop trying to hurt you. But the truth has power. And sometimes the truth is all the justice you need. Tyler would have been 7 years old now. I imagine him laughing at cartoons, struggling with homework, asking endless questions about everything. He was robbed of those years, but he wasn't robbed of love. Real love from people who saw him as the gift he was. And Patricia? She lost a family, a legacy, and the respect of everyone who truly knew what kind of person she was. She thought Tyler's death would free us to give her normal grandchildren. Instead, it freed us from her.